as we look at 2023, I think sometimes we want to look at the fundamentals. We want to look at the fundamentals of what is church about. So if you're hanging out and you're checking us out, this isn't our every Sunday. We don't get up and go through like this health checklist of what church is about. But if this is your church home, listen, we are about these things. And so we have to pause systematically through the year and just talk about vision, direction, focus, who we are and where we're going. One of the sentences that I love, 2 sentences actually, so you want to take notes on these 2 sentences. There'll be a quiz coming a couple slides later. It goes like this. It says, next steps for Thrive Church. When you focus on growing a church, you sometimes get what? Disciples. And when you focus on growing disciples, you will always grow the church. Do you see how that's playing together? Do you see what that's saying? It's saying when you focus, listen, if we just want to grow, right? We just want to grow. Oh, we can do that. We can put up a big tent. We can hire clowns and give cotton candy and have dunk booths, and we can put on carnivals. And guess what will happen? We'll grow. But how are we growing? What are we growing? And to what extent, right? This is a question, I think, that we want to be focused on as we evaluate what we're doing. Our call, biblically, the heart of Jesus that we're called to do as a church is to help people take their next step in their relationship with God. If you're here and you say, I have no relationship with God, this is church for you. If you're here and you say, I have 45 years of a relationship with God, this is a church for you. We want each person where they're at to take the next step in their relationship with God, to grow forward, to know God better, to put their faith, to trust, to surrender, to memorize His Word, to build their lives upon His Word so we won't be shaken. That's what it looks like at our church. We're committed to growing disciples. We're committed to helping each individual person that calls Thrive Church their home to take their next step in their walk with God. That's what it calls, that's what it means to build disciples. As you build disciples, you build a church. Because the church is made of Christ followers. That's who makes up the church. So as we begin to move forward, that's something that we want to strap on. Now, the series called Rewired, as you can see on the screen up there, Rewired is what we're starting. We're going to be spending 7 weeks on this topic, and we're going to be looking at the heart. We're going to be looking at the heart. And then after this series, we're going to start another series that looks at the heart, and then another series that looks at the You guys are sharp. I mean, you are with it this morning. This is awesome. We're looking at the heart because the heart matters. The heart is important. So much so, King Solomon wrote this down in Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And so as we look at that verse, sometimes you drop back to English class. Remember, I took you to high school. Now let's go to English class in high school. What was this called? Diagramming sentences. Who loves to diagram sentences? You are sick people. I didn't understand it then. I don't understand it now. But here, this verse, the subject, the verb, the direct object coming after it, the subject's actually you implied. It's a command. Guard your heart, right? Above all else, guard your heart. There's no subject listed, so it's a command. It's an imperative. It's you implied. So this verse is for who? It's for you. You are to guard your heart. You are to guard your heart. Hey, by the way, as you guard your heart, you should be guarding it above all else because it is the most important thing. If I ask you at your house, if you had to grab the most important thing out of your house and you knew it was all going to be lost, there's a giant meteor just coming right for your address. It's going to blow up everything there. You have 1 minute to run in there and grab one thing out of your house. What would you grab?
My dog.
What would you grab? That's the thing you're guarding. That's the thing you're guarding. That's an indication of what is above all else important to you. Right? That's what we're looking at. And this is what the verse is saying. You guard your heart. Above all else, guard it. Right? So why? Why am I guarding my heart? For everything you do, what? Flows from it. Everything you do flows from your heart. So you're called first and foremost to guard your heart. Now maybe this might make another connection to help you understand something. How important is your physical heart? I'm not a biology major, but I'll play one on the stage. Your heart is part of what system in your body? The circulatory system. If your circulatory system is not working, I got news for you. Ain't nothing working. Are you with me? If your circular system is not working, heart is not pumping blood, your respiratory system, is it working? Probably not. Digestive system? Probably not. Nervous system? Probably not. I'm going to stop there because I don't know any more systems. We're just going to keep moving forward. But the idea is your heart is central and drives all other systems of your body. Would you agree? Now let me ask this question. How important is your spiritual heart? Well, Pastor, what are you talking about there? Like, what are we really talking about? Like, are we talking about the heart? Are we talking about something different than the heart? And that's a great question to ask. Biblically, as you would study the Bible, the heart refers to the inner person, your innermost being, yourself, your core of who you are, the thing that defines you. Can I say this? Your passions live in your heart. And your passions are the thing that most strongly drive you. Would you agree? Your passions are the thing that most strongly drive you, the things you think about, you dream about, you consume, you sit there and it's like, where are you right now? You ever talk to somebody and they're not listening to you? Ever happen on Sunday morning? No, I'm just kidding. But you're talking to somebody and you're like, hey, you're not in this conversation. Where are you right now? And they're off daydreaming, thinking about something else, right? It's where their heart leads them. It's what they long for. It's what they desire. And biblically it's saying, guard your heart, for from it all things flow. Right? It is the spring of all things in your life. Depending on what translation you use, it's describing the importance of your heart, because your spiritual heart at the core defines who you are. At the core, it defines what your passions are. At the core, it defines where you're going. At the core, your spiritual heart dictates everything. Dictates everything about you. Now, there's this leadership guy. He was in pre-law. He went to be a lawyer, and then God called him into ministry. He planted a church in Canada. His name's Carey Nieuwhof, and this is a quote, and I'm going to develop it a little bit more at the next slide. This is the final quote that he said. In his life, he's made this statement, the statement he wants to build everything off of. Live in a way today that will help you what? That's why I like the quote. Live in a way today that will help you thrive tomorrow. Okay? Live in a way today that will help you thrive tomorrow. There are things I don't want to do today, but it will give me a better tomorrow. Are you with me? There's disciplines in my life that are not fun, that don't reward the way I want to be rewarded, and it's not as wonderful, right? You want a bowl of ice cream, or do you want a bowl of peeled raw carrots? Which do you want? Well, I want the ice cream. It's happy today, but guess what? The carrots are the better decision for tomorrow. Live in a way today that will help you thrive tomorrow. Because for him, he was going busier and busier and busier, faster and faster and faster, more and more and more. He was overcommitted. He was overworked. He was overspread. Do you know who paid the price? His family. It paid the price because he was going until he hit a point of burnout. He hit a point of burnout, and at the burnout stage, he looked back at his heart, and this is what he wrote. My spring had dried up as my heart went hard. Everything else good dried up. My patience, my kindness, my compassion, my gentleness, gone. Maybe some of you guys are like, yeah, keep going. What does he say next? Ironically, guarding your heart isn't one more thing to do. It's the thing that leads you to everything getting better. What do you need to cut out of your life so that your heart can come alive again? And collectively, everyone in the church said, All right? Thank you. What do you need to cut out of your life today so that your heart can come alive again? Because if you have a divided heart, you don't have a whole heart. If you have a split heart, if you are overworked, overtaxed, overstressed, overconsumed, and you're not getting what matters most on the foundation of your life, that your whole life will crumble. You'll dry up. You'll burn out. You'll evaluate, what am I doing here? What's my purpose? What's my point? You see, your spiritual heart is important, and that's why Solomon says, above all else, guard your heart, for from it flows the abundance of life. That's the important verse that by the end of this year, 2023, you should have memorized at Thrive Church. At the end of the year, our sermon series are going to be focused on this. We're going to be growing in small groups in this way. We're going to be pushing our church to get healthier spiritually by getting their heart guarded. You know what you guard your heart with? The Word of God. The Word of God is what you use to guard your heart. From who? Why am I guarding the heart? Well, there's an enemy. The enemy wants to attack you. The tactics are in the Bible. It's made clear. This is what he's going to throw at you. Here's how he's going to try to trip you up. Here's what you got to be on your guard with. And by the way, if you're guarding your heart, it works even better to be in a community of other people who are guarding their hearts so you can guard each other's hearts. And by the way, by guarding your heart, you're going to know what you long for most, and you're going to have a purpose greater than you that you're living for. See how our values flow into this verse of guarding your heart? That's where we're going to be going. That's what we're going to be talking about in 2023. Our focus is going to be on the heart because we are committed to understanding our lives through biblical lenses so we can improve our spiritual health, allowing us to take our next step in our relationship with God. That's what this verse points me to as I look at it, and it's a simple verse. This is a simple message. It's really short. We're getting out early, remember? And so with this, we're looking and we're saying, how do I guard my heart? What's it going to take? Where do I start? Today, you know where you start? Evaluate your heart. What's something you have to cut out of your life for the sake of your heart? How can you live today to thrive tomorrow? What does it look like to make these decisions, to make these changes? Remember for the quiz? You remember? Did anybody write down the answers? Here it is. Pop quiz. When you focus on growing a church, you sometimes get disciples. But when you focus on growing disciples, you'll always grow the church. Well, why is this word church so important? Whose church is it? Why does it matter? What's this all about, right? What's this all about? According to Colossians 1:18, he, again, we're dropping into English class, it's a pronoun, and who is he representing? Christ, all right? He, Jesus Christ, is also head of the body, the church. And he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he himself will come to have first place in everything. Can I just say this? At Thrive Church, we believe this church belongs to Jesus Christ. This church belongs to Jesus Christ. This church, biblically speaking, is a bride. It's weird. I'm a guy. I'm thinking I'm a bride. Like maybe ladies, you're like, oh, wonderful, new dress. Let's do this again, right? You're like, but we're a bride of Christ. Christ is the head of the church. This church belongs. It is the body of Christ. It is his. The church, all churches biblically, do not belong to the pastor, do not belong to the board, do not belong to the elders. The church biblically belongs to Jesus, and in turn, we sit up here leading from a position of being a steward. We sit up here leading from a position saying, you know what, I am accountable to Jesus because this is his church, this is his bride, the people, the believers that call this church their home, the collection of Thrive Church. Listen, Christ is the head, period. It is not mine. It is not the elders. It is not the deacons. It is not the ministry team leaders. It is Christ. Christ is the head. He is the be-all, end-all. This is his, and we live for him. So at our church, we say we have one head. We have one head, and that's Jesus. And the more we get to know Jesus and who Jesus is and what he calls us to do, our church should have one heart. Our church should have one heart. Some lawyers asked Jesus a question, trying to trip him up. This is found in Matthew 22, 36 to 40. And they said, hey, Jesus, what's the greatest commandment in the Old Testament? Well, the Old Testament had over 300 commands and over 600 don't do's and all these laws. And it was just rule after rule after rule after rule. And they're trying to trick Jesus because it's like asking you to pick which child do you love more. Maybe you have one child. It's an easy answer. What if you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Now it's like, which child do you love more? Jesus, which rule's your favorite? And he answers it and he summarizes all the rules in these 2 commandments. You're called to love God with all your heart, soul, and strength. And likewise is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. So our one heart, if Christ is the head of our church should have the heartbeat of loving God. That's you and your heart, loving God, your spiritual heart, the place that your life flows from, the thing that you're supposed to be guarding. That's your heart. You're supposed to be loving God with all of your heart, all your soul, all your might, and love your neighbor as yourself. That was repeated again in Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. It says, man, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and teach your kids to do the same. And model it for your kids. And then it goes into Philippians chapter 2, 1 through 4. It's a great section of verses, and it talks about, listen, in the church, you shouldn't be looking out for your own interests, but the interests of others. And there should be this unity and this oneness and this connectiveness that comes together. Because Christ is the head, we have the one heart that Christ wants us to have. Therefore, we as the church follow through with unity, with direction, with purpose, with understanding. We're to be growing disciples, not growing the church. Because when you grow disciples, you always grow the church. So let's get our heads on straight. Let's know what matters. Let's know who we're listening to. Finally, one head, one heart. The next slide says many hands. Many hands, right? Take a look at those hands you got. Take a look at them, right? Who's got a manicure lately, right? Who needs to clip their nails? Who, right? You look at your hands. God's given you hands. God's given our church people. Those people have hands. And those hands, the many hands at Thrive Church, are to be called to be doing the work that Jesus says a church should do. Ephesians 4, again, this is a mini sermon. I could preach on each one of these, right, for a long time, but we're not doing that. Ephesians 4, 11 to 13 says, "So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and the teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ." Can I ask you a question? Has the Bible been clear this morning? Have you been seeing how the verses fit together and what we're called to do, and understanding that you are the subject? You are the person being called to do these things, and we want to live it out, and we want to see it happen, and we want to see it move forward. Listen, we're called with one head, one heart, many hands to accomplish the work that God has put in front of us. We're called with one head, with one heart, with many hands to accomplish the work. Pastor BJ has this saying, I loved it, so I stole it from him, but I told him I stole it from him, so he gets the credit for it. But he has this saying, hands on. What does that mean? That's right. And then they're saying, hands together, hands open. So God's given us many hands at our church, and with those many hands, we're called to be hands-on ministry. If you're in a ministry team, if you're serving in a capacity and using the gifts that God's given you in a capacity, you have hands-on. You have hands-on at our church, helping us move forward as a church. That's not to say there's people here that are serving in different outlets, but maybe it's just not as directly connected to our church. But we want to see our hands on in ministry. We want you to be able to say, this is what my hands are on at Thrive Church. This is what I'm a part of. This is what I'm doing. This is where I'm serving. We want to see people saying they have their hands together. Hands together mean what? Praying. Praying for what? Praying for Thrive Church, praying for opportunities, praying for obedience, praying for the condition of my heart, praying for a oneness of unity, praying for the direction we're going in, praying for our overall goals. And finally, we should have our hands open in giving. In giving, God calls generosity a thing that the church should celebrate, because God's blessed us. In turn, we give back to bless him. And it's a thing of generosity. It's a thing of beauty that comes out of that as we give back to God as an act of worship. So if you're going to skip the business meeting, pay attention, take notes. What have we accomplished? Well, first thing, we've been able to rebrand our church. Our fellowship rebranded from the Fellowship of Grace Brethren Churches to Charis Fellowship. Looking the next 20 years out, how can we brand ourselves as a church? It doesn't change our beliefs, but just changes our name. How can we brand ourselves to be more effective in the next 20 years? So we looked at that as a church, that our fellowship is taking this on. Where are we going? And we landed on Thrive Church, because you say, come with me to thrive. Come with me to thrive, a church that will change you, help you, grow you, meet you where you're at, imperfect people being changed by God. Come to Thrive Church. And we have Thrive Kids, we have Thrive Students, we have Thrive Groups. It all describes the picture that we want people to grow forward in their personal relationship with God. We want people to grow in biblical community with other believers. We want people to have a purpose greater than themselves. When those three things happen, you will thrive. You'll be living today to thrive tomorrow. So we worked on that rebrand. We went out, we visited other churches, we scoped out to see what they're doing. We stole their best ideas. We left the bad ones behind. And we worked on really trying to update and take what we're doing and to be able to build a system and a structure that will help us move forward into the future. We've mapped out where our congregation lives. As you leave, the map's back up on the wall. There's little yellow pins. You can see where our congregation lives. If you didn't get a pin on that map yet, go ahead and put a pin on the map. They're on the sides of the map. You can pin where you're at. It helps us see, where is our congregation coming from? Because we at Thrive Church believe we want to have spiritual DNA that spreads. We want to have spiritual DNA that spreads. We want to send out and reach more people and having a spiritual DNA that spreads. And in doing that, we say, listen, we think a campus model where we take what we do here and we replicate it, we reproduce it, we start another campus, we start another church that's going to be reaching people that don't come here, that aren't attending at 661 North Newberry, but that would attend at another campus in another community that we're reaching and targeting. So we've mapped out where our congregation is from, and we've identified a possible location of what we think the area would work if we would set something up and we would see it go. Number 3, we're growing and we're excited to keep growing. We're growing and we're excited to keep growing. Felt like yesterday. Sunday, January 1st, we had 8 babies in the nursery. Everybody said, wow, 8 babies in the nursery. And it's like, man, we could have 10. And by the way, there's a total of 12 coming in the future. Like, there's lots. We're growing numerically. We're growing with babies. We're growing with elementary, with teenagers, with young adults, with middle age, with older people. We're growing across the board. We're excited about it. And as we grow, we have to have a plan that will take us where we need to go. So what Pastor BJ is going to explain in the vision meeting is how we're going to develop, and we've developed the system already, to be a sustainable and scalable model for growing a healthy church. What got us here won't get us there. We recognize it. What got our church to this point is good, but as we grow, we have to reevaluate, right? As you added a third kid, a fourth kid to your family, some people had to buy new cars. You didn't have enough seat belts to be able to all go somewhere. You had to change up your house layout. You had to double bunk kids in some rooms. You had to, what are we doing? Where are we going? How are we making this growth attainable? And how are we making it scalable? Those are important words, and we have a plan that we want to be able to share with you. Our next steps as we dream of a campus. Part one, we visited other churches. I talked a little bit about this. That part of this year, we want to visit churches that are doing what we dream of. We want to visit churches that are doing what we dream of and to be able to talk to them and see what their process is and how they're doing it and how we can maybe take some of those ideas and see what fits for us at our church. Part two, we want to build out our detailed plans. We're going to be able to land on exactly where, exactly how, exactly when. It's scary to put those names and numbers in front of things, but we've got to land on how are we going to accomplish it. And as a church, let's start chipping away at this process and let's land with details. We've had a vision. 2023 will be a time that we get details to our vision, and we're going to talk about how that happens. Next, we want to develop and equip our church to accomplish the vision. That's you guys with your what? You with me? Doing, praying, giving. We're calling people together, say, hey, be a part of this. Be a part of this. Now, it wasn't quite a year ago, but I don't want to ask because I'm scared who's going to say I stopped doing that. But I want to call you to renew the 451 challenge. I want to call you to renew the 451 challenge. We ask our church to set their alarms for 451. And when your phone buzzes, when your Alexa goes off, when you're, whatever it is that you're using, your calendar that you're writing the schedule on with your paper and a notebook, right? Whatever system you use at 451, to stop and pause and pray, because in York County, the last census said there's 451,000 people in York. There's 451,000 people in York, and over half of that population identified when surveyed in the census that they have no religious affiliation. We call them nuns, N-O-N-E, none, no religious affiliation. Over half of the county that we live in, half of the neighborhood that you drive past when you go home, half of the families going to your kids' school, half of the kids on the sports team, over half of our county have no religious affiliation. So let me ask this, does York County need another Thrive? We could be praying at 451, God, we're praying for people and resources that we haven't met yet to reach out in this vision you've given us to expand and spread our spiritual DNA. And when your phone goes off, whoever you're with, you can say, hey, I just got to stop and pray for my church. Did you know there's 451,000 people in York and over half don't go to church? And with your kids, you stop and say, God, grow this church. Give us the people and resources that we need. Give us the unity of heart. Help us to have hands on, hands together, hands open. Help us to be moving forward and to know, how am I a part of the story that's being told? Let's talk about how we're a part of the story being told. And as Pastor BJ comes up here, a great way is to sign up to be a part of that connection class. A great way is to be a part of that connection class, because this is a hands-on, we feed you lunch, it's after church way for you to hear who you are, who God made you to be, who we are, who God has called us to be as a church, and how we're better together. How your gifts, your talents, your interests, your focus, how those things come together to our church to help our church continue to grow in a scalable and attainable way.